All right, let's dive into a theory about Earth's history that is, well, it's pretty out there. We're talking about a framework that suggests almost everything we think we know about geology, biology, and even our solar system is actually the result of one single, unbelievably chaotic event. And this whole story, believe it or not, starts in the cab of a truck. The guy behind this theory, Darrell Waters, was a long-haul trucker. For 30 years, he drove across North America and he just looked. And he noticed something weird in all those road cuts you and I drive past. The lines between the rock layers, layers that are supposed to be separated by millions of years, were just too clean. There was no soil, no erosion, no evidence of worms and roots churning things up. It was like looking at pages in a book that were printed one right after another, with no time in between. And that simple observation just begs the question, right? What if we've been looking at the evidence all wrong? What if the standard story has some massive plot holes that we've just kind of learned to ignore? So today, think of this as a detective story where the clues have been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Okay, so first, let's look at the clues. These are all the nagging little puzzles that don't really fit neatly into the conventional timeline. You know, the kind of things that get written off as weird one-offs or get explained away by just adding more and more time to the clock. But what if they're not exceptions? Okay, so take polystrate fossils. We're talking about tree trunks found fossilized, standing straight up, cutting through multiple layers of rock. Now, the standard model tells us those rock layers were laid down over millions of years. For that to work, a tree would have to stand there perfectly preserved and not rotting for thousands, maybe millions of years while sediment slowly buried it. It just doesn't make sense. The go-to explanation is, oh, it must have been a bunch of really fast local floods. But if they're all local events, why do we find these exact same fossils on literally every continent on Earth? Or what about the huge sauropod dinosaurs? To pump blood 10 meters straight up into the air to its brain, a creature would need blood pressure that would instantly kill any animal we know of today. So, what's the solution from the standard model? Well, they must have just held their necks sideways, like a giant garden hose. See what happened there? The physics didn't work under today's conditions, so instead of questioning the conditions, we just changed the animal. The problem wasn't solved, it was just dodged. And it's the same story with this absolute unit, the Quetzalcoatlus. It weighed 250 kilograms. For perspective, the heaviest flying bird today is only about 18 kilos. In our atmosphere, it is physically impossible for this thing to have ever gotten off the ground. So the response? Reclassify it. It must have been a glider, or maybe it didn't fly at all. Again, the evidence, a creature with giant wings built for flight, is reinterpreted because it doesn't fit the model. You starting to see the pattern here? The upright trees, the dinosaur necks, the giant flyers, finding soft tissue in dinosaur bones. These aren't just a collection of weird little oddities. It's a coherent pattern. And in any investigation, a pattern is a signal. It's a giant flashing neon sign telling you that maybe, just maybe, the physical rules of the past were completely different. So this is where the Unified Theory of Geologic History, or UTGH, comes in. It builds on the foundation of Dr. Walt Brown's hydroplate theory, and it proposes a single, sweeping explanation that tries to solve all these puzzles at once without having to invent a new story for every single clue. Now, the central idea is absolutely mind-bending. It proposes that there was a massive ocean of water, not on the surface, but under the Earth's crust, trapped under immense pressure. And then, about 5,300 years ago, that crust cracked open. The water wasn't released, it detonated in a cataclysm that totally reshaped not just our planet, but our entire solar system in a matter of hours. So, what would that world have been like before the rupture? Well, according to the theory, the atmosphere was much denser, maybe 1.5 to 2 times what it is today. And right there, that solves the problem of the giant flyers and the sauropod necks. The physics just works. The extra lift makes flight possible, and the external pressure helps the animal's cardiovascular system. Suddenly, the anomalies make perfect sense. Oh, and the world also had no seasons and, get this, a 360-day year, a number that pops up in almost every ancient calendar system on the planet. So how in the world did this happen? The theory says it wasn't some random event. Think about bending a paperclip back and forth until it snaps. Over thousands of years, the moon's tidal forces were flexing the Earth's crust, creating a planetary scale fatigue fracture. And when that final little bit of crust gave way, it all happened incredibly fast. That fracture ripped through the crust at the speed of sound in rock, about 3.5 kilometers a second. In just over 3 hours, it had zipped around the entire planet, creating the 65,000-kilometer-long mid-oceanic ridge, which is, by the way, the largest single geological feature on Earth. And the energy it unleashed is just hard to even comprehend. The water trapped under that crust was pressurized to over 40,000 times the atmospheric pressure you and I are sitting in right now. So this wasn't a leak or a flood. It was like uncorking a planetary-sized bottle of champagne. And the result of that pressure release was an explosion. A jet of water and rock and mud was fired into space at somewhere between 47 and 93 kilometers per second. Earth's escape velocity is just over 11, so we're talking 4 to 8 times the speed needed to leave Earth's gravity behind. This event wasn't just a global flood, it was a launch event. It literally shot pieces of our planet across the solar system. And if you fire a planetary shotgun into space, that buckshot has to land somewhere. The theory argues that the proof of this event isn't just buried here on Earth, it's scattered all over the place, like evidence at a cosmic crime scene. So let's connect the dots. The moon has a thick layer of debris almost exclusively on its near side, the side that would have been facing Earth during the explosion. Mars has evidence of massive amounts of water, with no good explanation for where it came from. Saturn's rings are surprisingly young and made of almost pure water ice. And back here on Earth, the Mariana Trench looks a lot more like the collapsed roof of a giant underground chamber than a slow-moving tectonic scar. But maybe the smoking gun is this. The isotopic signature of water found in comets is a dead-on match for the kind of water we'd expect to find deep beneath the Earth's crust. This idea completely flips our understanding of the geologic column. From this perspective, the fossil record isn't a slow, painstakingly recorded timeline of evolution over billions of years. It's a settling column. It's the result of a world's worth of life being violently churned up in a global flood and then sorting itself out by density and hydrodynamics as it settled. Seafloor creatures are at the bottom because they were buried first and they're denser, not because they're older. It's a story told by physics, not by time. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. A good scientific framework has to do more than just explain stuff that's already happened. It needs to make specific, testable predictions about things we can go out and measure. And this theory does exactly that. It lays out a list of claims that can be proven right, or, just as importantly, proven wrong with data we can get our hands on. For example, the theory predicts that we should be able to find a layer in the tree rings of old sequoia trees that marks the first winter the planet ever experienced, and it should contain iridium from deep within the Earth. It predicts that the famous iridium layer that supposedly killed the dinosaurs will have an isotopic signature that matches Earth's mantle, not an asteroid. It makes claims about human genetic diversity and about the very structure of the rock pulled up from the mid-oceanic ridge. And here's the kicker. The samples to run all of these tests, they pretty much already exist, sitting in labs and archives, waiting. And that really brings us to the final, and maybe most provocative point. If this theory can explain so many different anomalies, and if it's testable with data we already have, why hasn't it been tested? The author argues that the roadblock isn't money or technology or logistics. It's conceptual. It's that we've been unwilling to even ask the questions. Which makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other massive clues might we be driving past every single day just because we think we already know the whole story?